Welcome back to our studios here in Lahore. I'm Hamza Amjad, and let's start with the UK. The government has published Operation Yellowhammer, which is its planning scenario for a no-deal Brexit. It outlines a series of reasonable worst-case assumptions for the impact of a crash-out on October the 31st. MPs voted to force the release of the contingency plans. Now, the document outlines risks including panic buying and rising public disorder over food and medicine shortages. The report says British citizens could also be subjected to increased immigration checks at EU border posts. Opposition leader Jeremy Corbyn has called out Prime Minister Boris Johnson for putting citizens at risk. Meanwhile, Brexit Party leader Nigel Farage dismissed the mayhem.
The idea, given there are over 100 ports, active ports in the United Kingdom, that even if there was a problem at Dover, there'd be food shortages, is complete and utter rubbish. It's Project Fear Mark II. It should be utterly, completely, totally disregarded.
The United Nations has warned Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu against his plan to annex parts of the occupied West Bank. Now, UN Chief Antonio Guterres says the proposed plan is a serious violation of international law. Guterres says the annexation will be illegal and will undermine the prospects for regional peace. He says it will weaken the viability of a two-state solution for the Israel-Palestine conflict. Earlier, Netanyahu said he will impose Israeli sovereignty on the Jordan Valley and northern Dead Sea if he is re-elected. Meanwhile, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation has called an emergency meeting to discuss Tel Aviv's escalation. Germany has offered to conduct a conference on Libya in conjunction with the UN. This is a bid to stabilize the oil-producing country where rival factions have been fighting over the capital. Berlin's ambassador to Libya, Oliver Auxer, says the plan is in its early stages. This will be the first major diplomatic push since the opening of an offensive by Eastern forces loyal to Khalifa Haftar in April. Earlier, German Chancellor Angela Merkel said the Libyan situation risks destabilizing the whole of Africa. She told the Bundestag that Berlin will do its part to avoid a proxy war in Libya. The US Supreme Court has approved the Trump administration's plan to limit the ability of migrants to claim asylum. Now, under the rule, people arriving through a third country must claim asylum there first before reaching the US border. Now, the plan will affect migrants from Central America who head north through Mexico. Curbing migration levels has been a key goal of President Donald Trump and forms a major part of his bid for re-election in 2020. Trump has called the Supreme Court ruling a big win for his border on asylum plan.
We should be compassionate and do the right thing. We should help those in need. The question, though, is that we are a nation of laws. We're a nation of sovereignty, and we are willing. And, what question I think is important to ask is, are we willing to send a clear message of what those laws are and then figure out how to navigate within a system of rule of laws?
Now, US lawmakers are condemning the government's new policy of deporting sick immigrants receiving medical care. In August, the US Immigration Service gave people in this category 1 month's notice to leave the country. Now, the decision caused fear and confusion among immigrants, forcing them to return to countries lacking medical facilities. 130 Democratic senators and Congress members have sent protest letters to the government, calling the move cruel and inhumane. In Nigeria, Boko Haram has killed 9 soldiers in an attack on a military base in the town of Gudambali in the northern state of Borno. The security officials say 27 other soldiers are missing. The Nigerian army says security forces countered the militants and repelled the attack. A decade-long insurgency in Nigeria has claimed over 30,000 lives so far. Two US lawmakers have written a letter to the Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, asking to press India to end the curfew in occupied Kashmir. Congress members Pramila Jayapal and James P. McGovern seek an immediate end of communications blackout and the release of the detained. The politicians expressed serious concerns over human rights violations in the valley. They said Indian forces have arrested thousands in Kashmir, some as young as 11 years old, since August the 5th. The lawmakers sought international media and independent human rights observers access to the occupied territory to probe the reports of abuse. President Donald Trump says the U.S. hit the Taliban in Afghanistan harder than ever over the past 4 days. He was speaking at a ceremony in Washington to mark the 18th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks. Trump said he ordered the attack against the group after cancelling peace talks. Negotiations were ended in retaliation for a bomb attack that killed a U.S. soldier last week. He said the attack showed the group's weakness rather than their strength. Washington and the Taliban were engaged in peace talks in Doha to allow the U.S. to pull its troops out of Afghanistan. Trump says hostilities against the Taliban will continue in the coming days. The U.S. invaded Afghanistan in November 2001, accusing them of hosting the masterminds of the 9/11 attack. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has kicked off a 6-week election campaign. Opinion polls suggest a tough race for Trudeau, who is seeking a second term in office. Trudeau faces an electorate more focused on economy, climate and affordability when it votes on October the 21st. Trudeau has pushed his accomplishments, saying Canadians get to vote for the country they want to live in once again. He will have to defend his record, including the handling of an ethics crisis that proved politically costly. Former Justice Minister Jody Wilson-Raybould has accused Trudeau of pressuring her to help a construction firm avoid a corruption trial. Last month, the watchdog ruled the Prime Minister and his team breached ethics. Now in Spain, thousands of protesters have rallied in Barcelona to mark Catalonia's National Day. They called for a break from Spain and the release of their jailed leaders. The Catalan separatists were draped in pro-independence flags. Some protesters said pro-independence politicians lack a clear separatist roadmap. Catalonia's independence drive created Spain's biggest political crisis in decades. The pro-independence parties are divided over future plans. China has summoned its German ambassador to lodge a protest at a meeting between Hong Kong activist Joshua Wong and Germany's foreign minister. China's ambassador to Germany, Wu Ken, said the meeting had a negative impact on bilateral relations. Wu said China has sufficient evidence that foreign forces intervened in Hong Kong during recent protests. The demonstrations erupted in the Asian financial hub against a controversial extradition bill in June. The region's government has withdrawn the bill, but now protesters are asking for democratic reforms. Two and a half thousand people are still missing a week after Hurricane Dorian struck the Bahamas. The Category 5 storm killed 50 people. Addressing the nation, Bahamian Prime Minister Hubert Minnis called the hurricane a national tragedy. Minnis said the death toll is expected to rise further.
Many are in despair, wondering if their loved ones are still alive. The official death count in the Bahamas as of the 9th of September is 42 in Abaco and 8 in Grand Bahama, for a total of 50 people. There are many who are still missing. The number of deaths is expected to significantly increase.
Officials say the list of those missing has not been verified against records of evacuees or those staying in shelters. They said thousands of people have been staying at shelters since the hurricane struck the Bahamas on September the 1st. Now, concerns are mounting for businesses as the trade war between the US and China goes on with no end in sight. US ginseng producers who are attending the second China International Import Expo are hoping to find new opportunities. This report has more.
The trade dispute between the US and China has undermined ginseng exports. The rich soil of Marathon County in the American state of Wisconsin is perfect for growing a range of crops, including the herb. Ginseng can take 5 years to cultivate and harvest, making it hard for farmers to react to changes in the market. But tough times have not put farmers off from looking for new outlets.
About 50% of crop from last year is still on the market. And we have a new crop coming up in about 4 to 6 weeks. So it has been a hard time for ginseng farmers here.
For many farmers, like Jiang, taking part in the expo is still an important part of their long-term strategy. Farmers are pushing for an even larger exhibition stand to include goods from other producers in Wisconsin.
Our business model has always been to bring the best from Wisconsin or U.S. to China, and that model will stay despite the temporary hiccup.
Growers hope this expo can help open new avenues and help the whole of Wisconsin.
Now, most people like me choose to pass the time on their smartphones when using public transport. But if you're in Kazan, Russia, you may come across a tram driver who sings to you as she drives, giving you an onboard entertainment at no additional cost. Let's take a look.
Tram driver Elzida Hafizova says she sings whenever she can, even at work. Her repertoire includes Tatar pop and folk songs, as well as some tunes she wrote herself.
My soul wants it. I do not sing at work only. I do it at home and everywhere, even when I speak on a phone.
Far from being disturbed by Hafizova's singing, her passengers say she actually brightens up their day.
Let her sing. What's the problem? Let her get paid more for this. She sings, she entertains people, but she also has hard work.
Hafizova's been driving a tram for 2 years now, but singing since she was 3. She calls her singing habit a gift from God.
Now, Italy's Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte has asked for the EU's fiscal forbearance to revive economic growth. Conte has met the bloc's top officials to win support for his plan to revive investment into the country. On his first visit to Brussels since retaking office, Conte repeated a lenient interpretation of EU fiscal rules. He met the EU Council President Donald Tusk, Parliament President David Sassoli and Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker. Conte expressed his intention to invest in Italy's green economy, digitalization and its impoverished south. The country came under pressure in June when its budget plan was assessed to be in breach of EU regulations. And with that, we're going to take a short break, but don't go anywhere. Business, sports and weather to follow. Welcome back. Now, Hong Kong Exchanges and Clearing has proposed a $39 billion takeover of the London Stock Exchange. The proposal will require the LSE to give up its acquisition of data company Refinitiv. The LSE says it will review the offer, but is committed to acquiring Refinitiv. The Hong Kong-based company's proposal comes as Britain is set to leave the European Union. It says the offer represents a 23% premium on the LSE's closing stock price on Tuesday. Asian stock markets are trading higher after the US and China moved to reduce trade tensions. Oil prices are also up about 0.5% in Asian trading following US President Donald Trump's decision to postpone new tariffs on Chinese goods. Tokyo's Nikkei 225 and the Kospi index in Seoul have both gained about 0.75%. The Shanghai Composite is nearly 0.5% higher, while the yuan has hit a 3-week high. Australia's ASX 200 is also in positive territory. Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index has slipped marginally following its bid for the London Stock Exchange Group. Well, it's 36 degrees in Lahore at the moment, but let's take a look at the weather around the world. Well, that was all I have from the News Bulletin at the moment. Do stay tuned to Indus News for further updates. And as always, thanks for watching.